There are moments on the spiritual path when you feel you're studying, meditating, expanding, and yet something strange keeps happening. Despite all your efforts, certain patterns return. Old dynamics reappear with new names, repetitive emotional cycles emerge again, and an unsettling sense of déjà vu begins to surface. It's as if your consciousness is trying to cross an invisible membrane that quietly refuses to open. This membrane, this subtle threshold between expansion and repetition, was mentioned by both Thoth and Jesus. Two masters separated by centuries, cultures, and cosmologies, yet both pointing to the same phenomenon, a single, very common human error that creates what we now call a spiritual blind spot, a psychological, energetic, and perceptual mechanism capable of trapping someone in the same timeline, even when the person believes they are evolving. The purpose of this video is to illuminate that blind spot, not with motivational phrases or surface-level explanations. Here, we blend what is historically verifiable, what is symbolically interpreted, and what is supported by neuroscience, quantum physics, and perceptual psychology. All presented with transparency. We're not here to reinforce spiritual illusions. We're here to expose them, because whatever you cannot see controls you, and whatever you finally recognize loses its power. Before we continue, a conscious invitation. Subscribe to this channel and tap the like button. This isn't just a technical gesture, it's part of a larger movement. Your interaction strengthens a collective field of awakening that helps other people expand as well. It's as if every action sends out an energetic wave that merges with a greater ocean of clarity. Later on, we'll talk about why this has real vibrational impact on both the individual and the collective. When Thoth describes the error that traps the soul in circles, he's not being metaphorical. He's referring to distorted perception, how the mind unconsciously creates realities based on deep internal imprints that the observer mistakes for objective truth. And when Jesus says that there are those who, seeing, do not see, he is pointing to psychological and vibrational filters that shape our interpretation of life and cause us to confuse emotional projections with reality. Neuroscience calls this perceptual bias. Quantum physics calls it observer-driven collapse. Ancient traditions call it illusion or the sleep of consciousness. Different languages for the same phenomenon. The inability to see where your mind is trapping you. Soon, we'll explore exactly how this blind spot forms, how it operates, and why it blocks access to new timelines even when you consciously desire change. For now, simply prepare the ground. This video is surgical. It was designed to reveal what you cannot see, yet silently dictates your choices, your reactions, and the direction of your life. Take a breath. Feel your field adjust. Let's continue. When we study the Emerald Tablets, keeping in mind that much of what is attributed to Thoth is symbolic, esoteric, and shaped by later interpretations rather than historically verified documents, we find a recurring warning: the soul that moves in circles. What Thoth describes isn't punishment, karma, or cosmic retribution. It is simply the human inability to perceive the precise point where the mind creates its own prison. He speaks of internal forces, psychic shadows, and vibrational patterns that repeat not because they are inevitable, but because the individual is blind to what rules them. This idea is surprisingly modern, despite its ancient language. Today, cognitive psychology calls this the metacognitive blind spot, the inability to perceive one's own distortions. Neuroscience reinforces that the brain does not seek truth. It seeks internal coherence, confirmation of what you already believe about yourself and reality. And in a sense, that is exactly what Thoth was warning about. When you cling to the coherence of the ego instead of the expanded truth of consciousness, your timeline collapses inward. You collapse the same reality over and over. Jesus warned about this too, when he said, "They have eyes but do not see, ears but do not hear." He was speaking about perceptual selectivity. That phrase, historically recorded in the Synoptic Gospels, had both a spiritual and a psychological meaning. Jesus observed how people projected their fears, traumas, and beliefs onto reality, making them unable to recognize truth even when it stood in front of them. It was not a lack of information, it was a lack of perceptual openness. Modern neuroscience confirms that the prefrontal cortex filters everything you perceive. Reality is not seen as it is, but as you are. And if what is within you includes fear, doubt, old patterns, limiting beliefs, or unresolved emotional memories, then your perception will be shaped by these layers. This is where it becomes delicate. Many people believe they are awakened simply because they study spirituality, seek knowledge, or are fascinated by the unseen. But information is not awakening. Studying is not transcending. Understanding concepts does not break patterns. Thoth and Jesus both warned that the greatest obstacle to evolution is not ignorance, but the illusion of understanding, the sense of progress while repeating the same inner mechanisms. Soon we will explore how this blind spot forms neurologically and how it blocks access to new timelines. For now, the essential truth is this: you cannot transform what you cannot see, and this is precisely where the error hides. When we talk about timelines, it's essential to separate what is scientifically verifiable from what is a modern spiritual interpretation. Quantum physics does work with concepts such as probability, superposition, and the collapse of the wave function. This collapse, the moment when a possibility becomes actual, depends on specific conditions, including interaction with the observer. But here is where interpretation enters. When we speak of personal timelines, we are making a symbolic bridge between scientific principles and the human subjective experience. Science does not confirm that you literally jump universes, but it does confirm that perception profoundly shapes the reality you experience. And it's in this convergence of science and subjectivity that the spiritual blind spot becomes so powerful. The collapse of your reality, metaphorically or not, depends on the quality of your focus. And focus, as neuroscience repeatedly demonstrates, is not voluntary. It is driven by what we call the internal map: memories, traumas, emotional associations, beliefs, and narratives about who you are and what is possible for you. When these elements remain unconscious, your attention is automatically drawn to whatever confirms what your mind already considers familiar. And the familiar, more often than not, is exactly what keeps you in the same place. So even when you desire a new reality, your inner observer continues collapsing the old one. Imagine looking at a landscape full of potential paths, yet your brain insists on seeing only one trail, the trail you were conditioned to walk. This conditioning is not rational, it is emotional and energetic. Research on the limbic system shows that repeated experiences, especially emotionally charged ones, become powerful internal references. They determine what you perceive, what you ignore, what you fear, and even what you desire. It's as if your perceptual field is tuned to recognize only the frequencies of a specific version of your life. Quantum physics calls this coherence, a state where all factors converge toward a single outcome. Spirituality calls it dominant vibration. Psychology calls it automatic patterning. 3 languages, 1 reality. You experience what you are tuned to. This is where the error reveals itself. Without realizing it, you try to change the world without changing the lens. You try to change results without changing premises. You attempt to enter a new timeline carrying the vibration, memories, and filters of the previous one. It doesn't work. Even with sincere effort, perception collapses the same patterns again. Not because you don't deserve more, not because it's not your destiny, but because the unconscious mind drastically limits the field of possibilities. Soon we will explore how spiritual ego reinforces this mechanism, creating the illusion of progress while keeping the internal structure intact. For now, recognize the root. You do not live what you want, you live what you perceive, and what you perceive is shaped by what still remains unilluminated within you. When we observe the modern spiritual journey, we encounter a phenomenon Thoth symbolically called the golden prison, and Jesus criticized directly when he spoke of whitewashed tombs. structures that look elevated on the outside but carry stagnation within. This is what we now call the spiritual ego, a refined form of self-deception. It is not the ordinary ego associated with identity and social functioning. It is a far subtler ego, difficult to detect because it wears the mask of awakening. The spiritual ego appears when someone believes they are advancing simply because they've accumulated knowledge, read books, practiced techniques, attended retreats, or mastered esoteric terminology. None of these, on their own, transform the internal structure. The person begins to confuse information with real expansion, and this is exactly the blind spot Jesus and Thoth warned about. The feeling of evolution becomes a smokescreen that hides the persistence of the same vibrational patterns. Psychology calls this cognitive dissonance. The mind creates narratives to justify the absence of real change. Neuroscience adds that the brain seeks to conserve energy, and repeating patterns is far easier than restructuring them. So the spiritual ego creates a cycle that gives the impression of moving forward, while internally everything remains the same. Life changes on the surface, but not at the root. This cycle is fed by two mechanisms. First, the human need for internal coherence. Second, the unconscious fear of confronting what truly needs to be seen. Many people use spirituality as an anesthetic rather than as expansion. They seek elevated concepts to avoid facing their shadows. They speak about light but avoid the process of illumination, which is deep, honest, and often uncomfortable. Thoth described this as the false circle, movement that appears to be a rising spiral, but is only repetition with a sophisticated appearance. And when Jesus criticized spiritual hypocrisy, he wasn't merely addressing morality, he was addressing the inability to see oneself clearly. Both were pointing at the same pattern: people mistaking movement for progress. More importantly, the spiritual ego reinforces the very blind spot we discussed earlier. Because once someone believes they're already awakened, they stop investigating themselves. They close off to perceptual humility, the capacity to recognize that there are still deeper layers to uncover, hidden memories to integrate, emotional patterns still shaping their choices. Without humility, there is no evolution, only illusion. It's vital to understand that the spiritual ego is not an enemy, but a defense mechanism. It forms to protect the psyche from the discomfort of facing internal truths. But in doing so, it keeps the person locked in the same timeline. It prevents the eyes from opening to what truly sustains their vibrational reality. It is an invisible, elegant, and highly convincing cycle. Soon we will explore the concrete signs that reveal when you are trapped in this cycle. For now, recognize this simple truth: what you believe you have transcended may simply be masked. And while it remains masked, it continues silently directing your life. If there is a part of the spiritual journey that demands courage, it is this one: recognizing the signs that, despite your effort, you are still living the same reality in different forms. It's not punishment, destiny, or lack of worth. It is simply the blind spot operating silently. And these signs are more precise than they appear. They manifest not only as emotional repetition, but as energetic, behavioral, and cognitive symptoms, indicating that your timeline hasn't changed. It has only rearranged itself on the surface. One of the first signs is cyclical repetition. Similar situations return, even with new characters. You change jobs, but the conflict is the same. You change relationships, but the dynamic repeats. You move to a new place, but the internal feeling remains unchanged. Psychology explains this as the mind recreating unresolved inner states. Symbolic physics describes it as vibrational resonance. If your frequency doesn't change, you magnetize new versions of the same experience. Another sign is emotional déjà vu, even in new contexts. Not the classic déjà vu, but a repeated emotional pattern. The same anxiety, fear, frustration, or helplessness appearing in different situations. This shows that your mind is collapsing reality from the same emotional core. You aren't reacting to the present. You're reacting to memories that filter the present. There is also the symptom of silent stagnation. Nothing explicitly bad happens, but nothing truly evolves. Life feels flat, suspended in a medium vibration. When Jesus spoke of those who bear no fruit, he was describing that inner sterility, not as moral condemnation, but as an energetic and psychological state in which new possibilities cannot emerge, because old patterns still rule perception. A subtler sign is blocked intuition. You try to feel or perceive, but something seems disconnected. Insights don't come. Clarity stays foggy. This happens because your perception is rigidly aligned to a single internal narrative. Neuroscience shows that repetitive emotional patterns suppress neural networks responsible for creativity and expanded perception. Spiritually, this means you're disconnected from higher probability timelines. Another crucial symptom is constant effort. Everything requires too much energy. Every shift feels heavy. This indicates that your inner frequency is not aligned with your conscious desires. You're trying to enter a new timeline while carrying the structure of the old one. Effort is the sign of vibrational incoherence. And finally, perhaps the deepest sign, the feeling that you are not living the life you know you should be living. A kind of homesickness for the future, an intuition that another version of you already exists somewhere, while you keep looping in repetition. This is not fantasy, it is an internal signal. Consciousness calling you toward a vibrational update that the blind spot has been blocking. Soon, we will explore how to break this pattern and begin seeing what has been invisible. For now, recognize these signs with honesty, not as judgment, but as diagnosis. They are portals, not punishments. We've reached a delicate and powerful stage of the journey. Identifying the blind spot is not enough. It must be dissolved. And the most effective practice, mentioned in different forms by ancient traditions, by Thoth, by Jesus, and confirmed today by neuroscience, is radical self-observation. It is not superficial introspection, not intellectual reflection, and not an analytical search for why you do what you do. It is a state of presence in which you observe yourself in motion, almost as if you step outside of yourself. This practice has deep roots. When Jesus said, "Watch and pray," he was instructing consciousness to remain awake while internal tendencies attempt to take over. Watch is not a moral act, it is a perceptual one. Thoth also spoke of rising above the movement of internal shadows, which symbolically refers to the same act of observing the mind without merging with it. Today, we understand this as metaconsciousness, the brain's ability to observe its own processes. Scientifically, this state activates the prefrontal cortex and reduces the automatic power of the limbic system. In simple terms, when you observe a pattern arising rather than reacting to it, the neural structure that sustains that pattern begins to weaken. This is supported by research in neuroplasticity and mindfulness-based therapies. When you see the pattern, you stop being the pattern. But how do you apply this in practice? Radical self-observation begins with a commitment. No thought, emotion, or reaction should go unnoticed. It is not about controlling what you feel. It is about noticing the moment the automatic impulse appears. For example, someone criticizes you and your body contracts or your mind rushes to defend itself. Instead of following the impulse, you observe. You stay aware of the sensation. You do not respond on autopilot. That small space, sometimes just a second, is revolutionary. This space creates what the ancients called the soul's gap, the interval between stimulus and response. In that interval, a new timeline is born. For the first time, you are not reacting from the old story, not reacting from memory, not reacting from conditioning. Perception opens, and with it, the possibility of a new path. This practice is uncomfortable at first. You begin to notice parts of yourself you'd prefer to ignore. Subtle vanities, disguised fears, resistances, automatic impulses, emotional narratives you've repeated for years. But this discomfort reveals that the blind spot is being illuminated. What once operated in the shadows begins to surface. And remember, consciousness does not judge, it illuminates. The goal is not to fight the ego, suppress emotions, or become Zen. The goal is to see with clarity, see deeply, see before acting. Because once you see, you choose. And when you choose consciously, you break the cycle that kept you locked in the same timeline. Soon, we'll explore how to stabilize this new perception through vibrational recalibration, the next step after illuminating the blind spot. That will also be the moment to include the passage about affirmations as vibrational codes, precisely where they have real function. After the blind spot begins to dissolve through radical self-observation, another essential phase emerges: energetic recalibration. Without this step, consciousness may recognize the pattern, but cannot escape it. Perception expands, but the vibrational field remains anchored in old frequencies. To shift timelines, symbolically or psychologically, you must reconfigure your baseline frequency. Quantum physics uses the term coherence to describe states in which multiple factors converge harmoniously toward a specific outcome. Spiritual traditions call this vibrational alignment. Neuroscience refers to it as neural synchrony, brainwave patterns functioning in an integrated way. Different languages for the same truth. Your inner energy must match the direction you choose. Most of the time, however, the body vibrates in a frequency inherited from the past. You think about change, talk about change, desire change, but vibrate past. Vibrate fear, repetition, old emotional memory. To recalibrate, you must bring the body into the present and teach the nervous system to embody an identity it has not yet known. Recalibration works on three simultaneous layers: the body, the emotion, and the inner narrative. First, the body. It anchors reality. It stores emotional patterns and reacts before the rational mind can intervene. Breathwork, micro-perception practices, and relaxation break the automatic cycle. Second, the emotion. Emotions are electrical currents that shape the vibrational field. When you stop suppressing or blindly believing them, they stop commanding and begin informing. Third, the narrative. The inner narrative is the script of the timeline. When it changes, your entire experience reorganizes around it. This is exactly where affirmations become powerful, not as empty motivational phrases, but as vibrational codes. And this is the perfect moment to integrate the passage you requested, because now it holds real functional significance. The affirmations you write, here in the comments or in your journal, are more than words. They are vibrational codes. When you consciously write, read, and repeat them, you create an energetic circuit that reprograms the mind and anchors a new timeline into your field. When I invite you to comment, it is not merely for engagement. It is to feed the collective flow of consciousness. It is an anchoring exercise. Daily repetition transforms vibration into identity. If you wish to seal this understanding now, write, here or for yourself. I consciously choose the frequency that creates my world. Repeat it over the next days, aloud or silently. Let it become the background music of your field, because each time you speak it, the universe reorganizes its particles around that new coherence. And little by little, everything that does not resonate with it begins to dissolve, naturally, effortlessly. At this stage, you are not merely changing thoughts. You are changing the vibration that collapses reality. You are teaching your mind and body to recognize a new frequency. Recalibration turns insight into embodiment, and embodiment into a new timeline. Soon, in the final block, we will explore the exact moment a timeline shifts and how to recognize when you have crossed that threshold. There comes a moment in the journey when everything changes, even though nothing around you looks different. It's a moment almost invisible to anyone observing from the outside. yet completely transformative for the one experiencing it internally. This moment does not appear as a dramatic revelation, nor as spiritual ecstasy. It arrives as a quiet clarity, the realization that you can, truly can, act from a place within you that did not exist before. This is the moment your timeline shifts. Not because the external world has altered, but because your internal point of reference has moved. After observing your patterns with lucidity and recalibrating your vibration, a space appears inside you, a space that was not available before, a place where the old reaction is no longer inevitable, where the automatic impulse loses authority, where the old story no longer has the right to speak on your behalf. That is precisely where the shift happens, when conscious choice becomes possible. This moment, though simple, is profoundly sophisticated. Neuroscience describes it as a neural bifurcation point, when the brain recognizes more than one available path and begins strengthening new roots instead of reinforcing old ones. Spirituality calls it a vibrational leap, and Thoth described it as the instant when light overcomes the movement of shadow. Jesus referred to it when speaking of being born again, not as symbolism, but as the capacity to respond to life in a way you never have before. Often, this moment reveals itself in something small, a conversation where you don't repeat the old pattern, a decision made with calm where anxiety used to rule, a situation that once triggered you and now finds you steady, a thought that used to dominate you and now passes without anchoring itself. It is in these micro moments that the timeline begins to move, not in the big events, in the subtle deviations of reaction, and when these deviations repeat, the old timeline loses strength. It still exists as a possibility, but it is no longer dominant. The new one starts stabilizing, gaining form, gaining vibrational density. It's as if your consciousness is pulling you toward a more lucid, coherent, and aligned version of yourself. A version that always existed but was previously inaccessible. The body also feels this transition. Your breathing changes. Your chest opens. Your mind slows down. Intuition becomes clearer, sharper, more accessible. It feels like a quiet inner space emerges between you and the events of life. Not detachment, sovereignty, not disconnection, clarity. This silence is not the absence of emotion, but the absence of noise. In that silence, you see things before they capture you, and that changes everything. With time, you begin to notice that life responds differently. Situations that used to repeat lose relevance. Old dynamics stop appearing. People who once had access to your deepest triggers no longer find the same pathways. Reality reorganizes itself as if recognizing the new vibrational state you've begun to embody. This is the real transition, when your consciousness stops being dragged by the past and begins building the present with intention. When the timeline stops being an unconscious reflex and becomes an unfolding of your presence. When you realize something subtle, yet decisive, has shifted inside you. As this journey settles into your awareness, something essential becomes unmistakably clear. Awakening is not an event. It is a rhythm, a continuous movement of refinement, a returning again and again to the most coherent version of yourself. And as you integrate everything explored so far, the blind spot, the collapse of perception, the vibrational recalibration, the subtle shift into a new timeline, you begin to understand that transformation is never imposed from the outside. It is invited from within. There comes a moment when the internal noise quiets, and you recognize that every shift you once sought externally was actually waiting for your internal permission to emerge. A new layer of coherence begins to take shape. Your choices feel lighter, more intentional, more aligned with who you are becoming. The old patterns lose their authority, not because they vanish, but because they no longer resonate with the frequency you now inhabit. This is where the true depth of your evolution reveals itself, not in what you know, but in what you embody. Awareness becomes presence. Presence becomes action. Action becomes reality. Reality becomes identity. Identity becomes trajectory. The timeline you now step into responds directly to the coherence you sustain. not sporadically, but consistently. You may notice that life slowly begins to reorganize itself around your new internal state. Opportunities that once felt distant begin to appear naturally. Conversations unfold with greater clarity and depth. People shift in relevance, either drawing nearer or drifting away according to the vibration you maintain. You begin to witness the architecture of consciousness operating through your lived experience, not as theory, but as something undeniably real. And if this message resonated with you, if you felt something shift, open, or realign within your field, honor that movement. Share it. When you articulate an awakening, whether through a comment, an insight, a reflection, or a testimony, you are not simply interacting with a video. You are amplifying a frequency that reaches people you will never meet, but who will feel the impact of what you expressed. Your presence here matters. Your voice matters. Your vibration matters. Every comment is a signal. Every share is a ripple. Every expression of clarity strengthens the collective field we are building together. So if you feel called, leave your imprint. Let your intention take form, not for metrics, not for numbers, but because your energy participates directly in this expansion. You are not a passive observer of consciousness. You are one of the points of light that expands it. And remember a truth both simple and profound. The highest timeline is not a place you hope to reach someday. It is a state of being available now. It emerges every time you choose awareness over automatic reaction, clarity over fear, presence over repetition. Carry that awareness, hold that frequency, return to yourself again and again. May your steps be steady, your perception lucid, and your presence aligned with the truth already awakening within you. Until your next awakening.